rally, coming to you live on WLIB 1190 AM in New York. We're streaming to you across the country on a number of platforms, including Facebook and NationalActionNetwork.net. We're live right here in the House of Justice, 106 West 145th Street. Call somebody. Tell them the action is on the air. Right now, I'd like you to get on your feet at home. Put your hands together for the president and founder of the National Action Network, the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton.
No justice,
no peace.
No justice,
No peace.
no justice,
No peace.
no justice.
No peace.
What do we want?
Justice.
What do we want?
Justice.
What do we want?
Justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
When do we want it?
Now.
When do we want it?
Now.
Fist bump the person next to you, tell them you love them.
Never give up and never give in. Change will come. Keep it down within. Trouble and trial won't last always. With God on our side, nothing but pride. Oh, be strong. A better day is coming. Yes, rain will come. Rain will come. Rain will come. Starting with you, Lord, rain will come. Lord, rain will come. Starting with you, Lord, rain will come. Lord, rain will come. Never give up and never give in. Rain will come. Keep it down within. Trouble and trial won't last always. God on our side, nothing but pride. Oh, be strong. A better day is coming. Won't be too long. Yes, rain will come. Rain will come. Yes, rain will come. God's rain will come. God's rain is gonna come. God's rain will come. God's rain is gonna
National Action Network Change Ensemble. Give them a big hand. Give them a big hand. Certainly we're happy to be with you another Saturday morning for the Saturday Action Rally. For you that are here in the auditorium, you that are outside because of social distancing, we're only letting in half the occupancy, and we have you seated right. You press folk got to separate. You see us separate, y'all can't be colliding together here now. We respect protocol here. It's funny how reporters write about protocol and ain't keeping protocol. Give a hand to our presider, Attorney Michael Hardy. And Brother Bravon Neal with us this week. To all of you listening live on 1190 WLIB AM in New York and Impact Television Live, I'll give a hand to our Impact family, nationwide television. Certainly today we have put aside our regular Saturday program to honor a man whose life honored us. The family and those will be announcing the official services and the official homegoing for former Mayor Dinkins in due time. But we did not think that the Harlem community and those around should let the week end without showing our love and affection and admiration for a man who changed the course of history for those of us in the city of New York. David N. Dinkins making a transition is not a normal transition, because he should be given the historic recognition that he deserved and that he lived up to. I remember that in the late 60s, early 70s, I was the youth director in New York of Operation Breadbasket under Reverend William Jones and Jesse Jackson nationally. And when there was some disagreement in the organization, and I know that Charlie Rangel and them don't know anything about disagreements. Everything was always crystal clear. But after some disagreement and Reverend Jackson, who was my mentor, left and formed PUSH, I left out of protest. I was 16 years old, and I left and formed my own youth group. And Clayton Jones, who was Reverend Jones's brother, was the only lawyer I knew. I went to him and said, I need to incorporate my youth group, and I'm 16. He said, well, I can't incorporate you because my brother's in Breadbasket. That'll look funny. He sent me to his law partner, and there was a law firm at 888 7th Avenue called Patterson, Michaels, Dinkins, and Jones. And the person that incorporated me at 16 years old was attorney David Dinkins. So I've known him since I was 16. And David Dinkins was a fierce fighter for what was right. He had his own way of fighting it. So as I got older and we wanted him to be more strident, and we'd be saying, why ain't you fighting back? We felt he was taking too much. We'd call him names. But he understood us. And as I grew older, I began to understand everybody doesn't play the same role. When we started National Action Network, and when we opened up the House of Justice that burned down 125th and Madison Avenue, it was Dave Dinkins that cut the ribbon to this organization's headquarters. And all the way through our history, he's been there. If you recall, many of you that are here every Saturday, he spent the first hours of his celebration for his 90th birthday. He came here that Saturday morning, and we honored him in his 90s, and he's been there since until he stopped coming out. I think that the city of New York needs to understand that all of this stuff about what David Dinkins didn't do is hogwash. David Dinkins inherited a city that was broke and divided. David Dinkins won a primary against a sitting mayor in the wake of the killing of Yusuf Hawkins in Bensonhurst. And he preached about a gorgeous mosaic when many of us didn't want to hear about unity. And he preached it anyway and won for mayor. He brought this city back. He not only instituted safe cities, safe streets, and brought on a force that brought crime down, he did it while Rudy Giuliani led a police riot against him at City Hall, where they stood out and called him the N-word. And we were saying, answer him, Dave, and he took it with grace and dignity. Crime went down under David Dinkins. David Dinkins also put the efforts to rebuild Times Square. All of that economic development started under Dinkins. Dinkins suffers the same thing that Barack Obama suffered. they had two bigots that succeeded them that took credit for the work they did. Numbers don't lie. Crime went down under Dinkins. By the time he left, it was a decrease of 25%. Write that in the paper. Talk about Dinkins came to a city, played. He helped to change the play. And because he stood up for a civilian complaint review board, that's why they had the police riot at City Hall. Because he said that police were not above the law. So it amazes me how you want to rewrite history. But thank God some of us are still around that can say that is not what happened, and we will not let you lie. Let the world know David Dinkins was our mayor, our hero, and we will never let you desecrate the name and legacy of David Norman Dinkins. Let me bring a few speakers that will share with us. First, every body that has ever fought for human and civil rights knows the queen of the civil rights movement, president of the NAACP State of New York chapters and vicinity. Let us hear from David's good friend and our queen, Hazel N. Duke.
Let me first express my gratitude to you for your call to Lloyd Williams and to my brother Charlie Ringel, the last of the Gang of Four. They said it was 4, but it was 5 because I was in the background. I was the woman. My mentor, my boss, my brother, David Norman Dinkins. A 40-year friendship introduced to me by the late Basil A. Patterson in Nassau County, where I was the first woman to be elected vice president of the Nassau County Democratic Party. I went on to serve as secretary for the Council of Black Elected Democrats. You all are too young to know these stories. But the real story I want to tell after Reverend Sharpton and my brother, Mayor David Patterson, so many stories, but let me tell you something, press. I was inside. You was outside. I worked for Dave Dinkins, the first black woman in the country, president of the New York City All-Track Betting. I managed Safe Street, Safe City. I managed Safe Street, Safe City. Press don't know what they're talking about. We wasn't disorganized. Bill Lynch was a strategy. Every Monday morning, the cabinet came, and I have text message from Nadine Hack, from Barbara Sable, all of us who worked for Dave Dinkins. And I watched Reverend Sharpton last night while they did Obama. What happened in this city and what is real, racism is alive and well. Racism is alive and well. And because David dared to do what everybody else have done, to give us a chance. Everybody who had served before me did not have education that I had. I graduated from Adelphi University with a bachelor's in business administration. So I didn't go. I came to New York City off-track betting under Howard Samuels. You all too young to know. So I knew the inside and outside of the company. And so When the mayor looked around, I served on this transition team, not for a job. But when the mayor appointed me, it was a great day in my life. For a black man to look back and see a black woman who was well educated and prepared to do the job. I did that. So as Reverend Sharpton say, we come today to honor a man what many have said is lies and not true. But when Reverend Sharpton called me and said we were coming today to pay tribute, I said, thank you, Reverend Sharpton, to let us have a chance to say what a great man, what we have lost in this city. But those of us who sit here today before you, who have worked with David, will see that his legacy live on, with the truth being told to our children, and we will write the history of David Norman Dinkins. Thank you.
Hazel Dukes, a young man that worked for David Dinkins and went on to become a powerful state legislator as well as the county leader of Manhattan Democratic Party, the Honorable Keith Wright.
Thank you, Reverend Sharpton. Good morning, everyone. I had the honor and privilege of growing up in Harlem on 135th Street, where I still live now. And my neighbor was David and Joyce Dinkins. Went to school with both his children, Donna and David, and high school and elementary school. And I just spoke to Donna today, and I want to reaffirm what she told Reverend Sharpton, is that a real funeral service will happen after this pandemic is over. But you have to remember, Hazel, Governor Patterson, and myself are the only ones on this stage that actually worked for David Dinkins. Now, we all knew him, we all loved him and such, but we worked for David Dinkins. When I got my last unemployment check, Hazel, I was just out of law school. David Dinkins hired me to become the director of the Harlem office for $30,000 a year. Best job I ever had. Best job I ever had. You gotta remember, the year was 1985. There were no cell phones. Fax machines were just invented. You know, beepers, everybody had a beeper. And Reverend Sharpton was giving his Saturday meetings at PS 175 on 134th Street. So, you know, I remember that David Dinkins back then was an absolute visionary. You gotta remember, he worked hard to become the borough president. He ran not once, but ran twice against a person named Andy Stein. So, you know, David Dinkins was a visionary. He issued the first reports ever about the desecration of AIDS in our community. We wrote the other report about homelessness, which was not really even being talked about back then. And he wrote about gentrification in this community. He issued this report that said that the city owned 85% of the upper Manhattan area. And he had a plan to make sure that our communities did not become decimated by gentrification. He formed a coalition, Reverend Sharpton, with a bunch of ministers up here. It came to be known as HCCI, Harlem Churches for Community Improvement. He was the leader of forming that organization. So he was a visionary. He got things done. And yes, Patterson and I, we talk about how the press would always call him a nice guy and maybe even too nice to be mayor and such. But you know what? This man was a Marine, tough as nails. He majored in mathematics at Howard University. So whatever you tell him, 1 + 1 better equal 2. And then he became a lawyer. I mean, there's nothing you could tell him that he couldn't out-talk you on. So I worked for him for 4 years. And David was tough as nails, let me tell you right now, but he was a teacher. He gave you constructive criticism. He gave you constructive criticism. And when I worked for him, I did everything from write his speeches to advancing him at certain functions. And yes, I had to go to the dry clean every once in a while for him. Because David always wanted to look sharp. Always look sharp. There was one event when I had to advance him and he asked me to hold his cashmere coat. So I said, Dave, you always look very sharp. He says, yeah, well, the people expect me to look sharp. So I understood that. And I held his coat. So I put the coat over my arm. It was a nice coat. You know how you turn the lining inside out? He came back and took me to the side and said, Chief, don't you ever hold my coat again like that. I said, what are you talking about, man? He said, you take 2 fingers, 3 would be preferable, and you hold it by the collar so it doesn't have a wrinkle in it. So, Reverend Sharpton, next time I have to hold your coat, you let me know. I know how to do it. So I want to end by this. I want to end with the words that David Dinkins used to say to all of us. Because David Dinkins was a true public servant. He wasn't a rich man, but he was a true public servant. So I often remember David saying, service to others is the rent that we pay while we are all here on earth. And as he's looking down with Basil Patterson and Percy Sutton and Fritz Alexander and my father as well, Shirley Chisholm, because they all served together in the state legislature. But as he's looking down with those great people, let him not find that any of us in this room and beyond, let him not find that any of us are in arrears. Thank you.
A woman unequaled by any in public service that has worked shoulder to shoulder with Dave Dinkins and Basil Patterson and Percy Ellis Sutton and our reigning legend Charlie Rangel is our state assemblywoman, and she has been the one that has kept us represented for decades to come. No one worked harder in the trenches than Inez Dinkins.
Good morning, family. Good morning, family.
Good morning.
David Dinkins made history as the first black mayor of the city of New York. And yet he was faced in his first and only term with multiple crises that this city had not seen in years. I thank Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton because we are not given the opportunity, we in this village and we in this city and we in this state are not given the opportunity to give Mayor Dinkins the honor, the recognition, to show the love and respect that he is due and should have. If it were not for today, then we would not have that opportunity. Our mayor, and I will always call him Mayor Dinkins, opened up racial barriers and tore them down. He broke glass ceilings. Do you know he was one of the very first, if not the first, mayor to increase the opportunities for minority and small-owned businesses in this city? No one talks about that. Reverend Sharpton talked about how crime went down. Giuliani is given the credit, but he's not due the credit. He is not due the credit. It's Mayor Dinkins who is due the credit because it's under his administration that crime went down. He raised that economic bar to help Times Square and to assist 125th Street with Percy Ellis Sutton and Congressman Charles Rangel and Basil A. Patterson for the Apollo Theater, which brought apart what we see, the Renaissance we see today. This is a man who served with dignity. This was a gentle giant who was a warrior, who knew how to fight without picking up a gun.
That's it.
His words were his bullets. And we must learn from that. Today I stand before you, unfortunately, as the only black woman elected from the borough of Manhattan. No, don't clap, because we got to do better than that. Clap for that. But today, we thank God for having allowed us the opportunity to have this gentle giant walk amongst us in our village and our city, to have represented us, to have fought for us, to have carried us, to have lifted us up on high, even though he was attacked in the media daily. And yes, the thing with CCRB, you know what he wanted to do with that? He wanted no police to have representation on the board. And that's why the police came out so hard against him, to ensure that he would not get a second term. Don't forget your history. Family, remember your history. David N. Dinkins is the equivalent of the Marcus Garvey of the 20th century. So I want to thank all of you for what you've done, because although Keith and Hazel and our Governor David worked for him financially, all of you and all of us worked on behalf of David N. Dinkins to ensure that he became the first black mayor of the city of New York. So the thanks goes to each and every one of you. God bless you. Stand tall. And as the Gang of Four +1 did, stand united. In unity, there is strength. In unity, there is strength. Stand up and be united so that we can carry forward. Thank you, and God bless.
And there's Dinkins. Many years ago, when we were fighting for representation in this city, 1977, Percy Sutton ran for mayor. And people did not keep commitments and ran anyway against him. As they convened trying to get some alternative to our ever being mayor in New York, there were 4 men, 4 gladiators, 4 Harlem horsemen that said, no, y'all are not going to keep denying us. And they, in a derogatory way, started calling them the Gang of Four. Well, they did not understand that Gang of Four was talking our language, because we needed some folks in the vernacular of the streets that would go gangster on New York politics, because they excluded us and diminished us. And we had 4 fearless men and 1 woman that says she was in the back, but she was really on the side of them, hollering and screaming all the way. That was Hazel. Those 4 men were Percy Ellis Sutton, Basil A. Patterson, David Dinkins, and 1 man. When Lloyd Williams and I talked earlier this week, stand up, Lloyd, the head of the Uptown Chamber of Commerce, he said that I don't think the 4 horsemen can make it out. He's doing a lot of interviews and all. But then I got a call this morning saying he was coming You don't understand that when you are a champion, you always are going to show up in the ring. May I bring you the last one that is here, that is the gang of four that has fought for us and kept us in the fight. Congressman Charles Ranger.
Stumbling around, but it may be hard for you to believe that one time I look as good as the Reverend looked. We all have fond memories of my buddy, and it's always difficult when one of the gang that you hung out with soars in terms of prestige. And he used to tell the story that we used to call each other brother before it really became word on the street. And I had an older beloved brother named Ralph, and my mom could only see it on television, and she asked me to explain to her what this business was about. Someone calling me brother when she knew that I lost my brother. So I explained to her, she smiled and everything went along, but I made a mistake and shared it with David, just as a joke. So David on his own found out my mom was in the hospital, and he sent her a bunch of roses, which I'd already shared with him that she liked. But he wrote a letter, and he said, Mrs. Rangel, I understood you may not have understood what I meant when I called your son my brother. But you see, I never had a brother of my own. And Charlie and I have become so close that if you would consider, since I lost my mom many, many years ago, if you would consider just acting like you adopted me, then it may be easier for you to accept me and call me brother. David would say Charlie thought that was okay, but then he told me that his mother used to go around talking about how proud she was of her son, the congressman. But when she started this business about her son, the mayor, that I found it difficult to understand. David had one sense of humor, but he was so sincere about loving people. So sincere that I just stopped going out publicly with him, because the time he would spend with people that really didn't like him but loved him, and the time he would spend with children when he used to have, I would never get a chance to get in a restaurant, because I could see that in his heart he just enjoyed being able to say that he was the mayor of the city of New York, and if you had a problem, and everyone knows it, they would write it down and have Bill Lynch take care of this for me. And believe me, I've had my share of what to take care of for my brother David Dinkins. Now, we all know that David's family decided to have a very quiet, small family funeral. But I think all of you know, and certainly Lord Williamson, you know that David belonged to the world. And that we are going to make certain that nobody's going to be able to say that we didn't show our love, our affection, and our appreciation for the work that he's done tirelessly in a society that the depth of racism couldn't even say the great things that he was doing for them. And even today, where so many of us are so pleased that the White House will be sanitized and I'm not as spiritual as I would like to be, but I know one thing, that God gave us a big break by bringing this man here to remind us that 72% of the white folks in this great nation of ours voted for him. And we may have thought when we had Obama how good God is, and she is good. But the problem is that they took off them hoods and slipped into regular clothes under the rocks with the snakes, and we didn't see him. And they brought out this man, and he brought them all out. So we know what we got to do. But in closing, let me say, and it's hard for me to explain, but David, one of his greatest sense of pride is when he was able to convince Nelson Mandela to come to Harlem. And the way he explained it with his soft-talking self, my wife and they were able to join these sororities. I did not even know what AKA was. And my wife, she said she was one. I said, me too. But he had a type of dignity, and he walked with it, and he spoke with it. And he said when he told Nelson Mandela how many millions of people looked like him in the United States of America, but unlike most of these people, they will never be able to return to the country that they look like. They'll never be able to enjoy the culture. They'll never be able to understand what their names and background was. And that if Nelson Mandela could see his way clear to come into Harlem, that in itself would erase the lack of memory that we ever had about the great continent of Africa, where people from all over America could say, he belongs to us. In the same way we felt about Nelson, I think our kids soon and very soon would know how we felt about David, who was soft-talking, but when he said, simplify for the United States to reign, he was one tough son of a gun. Thank you so much.
Give a hand, Congressman Charlie Rainbow. And we appreciate him coming out and being here today for his dear friend. We're going to hear also from Governor Patterson, who worked for Dave Dinkins, and we're going to hear Senator Chuck Schumer call. He's on the way. And this is befitting for a man. I hope the press gives justice to the legacy of Dave Dinkins. And I hope they stop giving credit to his successor for what he did. And I'll leave it there. I won't talk about Rude Rudy no more today, because we're honoring Dave Dinkins. I just think that all of those that distorted Dinkins and gave Giuliani credit for what he did, look at him, look at Rudy now. That's all I can say. Keith Wright and Hazel Dukes and David Patterson said they were the only three on the stage that had worked for David Dinkins. But that is no longer true, because two people that worked for him have now joined the stage. And I want to hear from them, and Governor Patterson and Senator Schumer is en route. David Dinkins had, as Alan Roscoff said, the most diverse, here's Senator Schumer. You know, Senator Schumer, put a chair over here. We socially distancing here, Senator Schumer, so don't get too close. We want nothing to happen to you till you're the majority leader. I said, we want you to be safe as the majority leader. Two people that worked for him in the most diverse administration we'd seen in City Hall was the present mayor and first lady of the city. And they wanted to come and share with us how they want history to be clear on a healing and a productive action mayoralty of Dave Dinkins, who gave them a chance in life. May we hear from the First Lady of the City of New York, who has stood as a shero for these last years. And we honor and respect her every time she's among us, because she has honored us. Some people have to get married to be noted, but she is noted on her own rights. I will borrow a joke from Mayor Dinkins. The story is that Charlene and Bill de Blasio was riding through Brooklyn, and Bill de Blasio saw someone that was rumored to be in their much younger days before they know each other, someone that took a liking to Charlene. And they were riding with the police escort. And Bill looked and said, you see him? Suppose if you had courted him and married him. He said, look at where you would be, standing on a corner in Brooklyn, not riding with me to Gracie Mansion. She said, if I had courted and married him, he'd be in the car riding to Gracie Mansion and would be the mayor of the city of New York. May we hear from the First Lady, Charlene McCray.
so much. And I'm deeply saddened to be here for this reason. I want to thank you, Rev, for this opportunity to pay tribute to Mayor David Dinkins. A great man. Great man. He did so much for this city. It is impossible to give him fitting tribute in just a few words. My heart is heavy because he's no longer with us. But I can't help but also feel a tremendous joy to have known him. Of course, we wouldn't be standing here. I wouldn't be standing here if it were not for him. Many of you know that I served in this administration, first in the City Commission on Human Rights, and then as a speechwriter. I was thrilled to become one of his speechwriters. Let me tell you, that was something to call home about. And later on, Mayor Dinkins liked to say that the speechwriters made him sound smart. I loved it when he said that. Of course, it wasn't true. Truth was that it was the other way around, that he made us smart. We had to dig deep. We had to learn about the history of our city. We had to learn about the communities, the strength, the assets, the obstacles to their hopes and dreams. We had to work hard to keep up with him. I was so impressed by his energy. I didn't know how he did it. I didn't know anything about government and politics before I worked for him. And I couldn't understand how he did so much. But I was fascinated by it. I wonder, what is his secret? And then, you know, his secret, it wasn't a secret at all, which I found out. He found joy in the work that he did. That's what it was all about, the joy of working for our people. That joy generated energy and enthusiasm, fighting for safe streets, new community centers, keeping our public libraries open 6 days a week, for beacon schools for our children. That's what got him going in the morning. And that inspired me back then, and it fuels me now. Every time I think about him, I'm inspired, still, by Mayor David Dinkins. I used to say, you're my favorite mayor. I can't say this when Bill's around, of course, but, you are my favorite mayor. And we talk a lot about gratitude this time of year. Well, I feel gratitude for his life, for everything that he gave us, beyond measure. Because I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have met Bill. Kiara and Dante wouldn't have been born. And I'm so grateful that he and Joyce, a couple bonded by 66 years of marriage, became dear family friends. I will always be grateful to Mayor David Dinkins, a New Yorker who inspired a generation of public servants. So while we celebrate Mayor Dinkins today, we also honor him by continuing to be foot soldiers on the March for Freedom. Right? Every day. Every day. And it is now my pleasure to introduce a former staffer and colleague from the Dinkins administration, someone whose life would definitely not have been the same if he had not worked for Mayor David Dinkins. Someone who has carried forth the mission of fairness, justice, and equity with all his heart. Our mayor, Bill de Blasio.
Everyone, first of all, it is a special honor for every one of us to be in the same room with a man that David Dinkins called his brother, and he meant it in the fullest, deepest sense. Because David Dinkins leaned on Charlie Rangel, and he believed in him, and he cared for him, and he was moved and inspired by him. And we couldn't have done everything we did if it wasn't for Congressman Charlie Rangel. Let's thank him. I also want everyone to know what you wear on your face says a lot, so I wore my Vote NYC face mask because people said David Dinkins couldn't win. I remember 1989 like it was yesterday. He wasn't supposed to be able to win the primary, let alone the general. They said it was impossible. Guess what? The people had a different idea. How many of you were around in 1989 who helped make it happen? Thank you. God bless you. You showed up and you changed the world. And thank you to everyone who voted in 2020 as well. They said it couldn't be done, but you showed up in record numbers. God bless you. And let's say three simple, brief things. First is to remember the fullness of what that man achieved, what David Dinkins achieved in 4 years. Think about one beautiful, powerful moment. Charlie Rangel referred to it when Nelson Mandela came to New York City. It was breathtaking. It was so moving. I remember Nelson Mandela walked by me going into City Hall, and it felt like, time stood still. I was like, this is the most amazing experience. Because what this city did and what David Dinkins did. And God bless Bill Lynch too. He was so important. And he believed in this. They helped Nelson Mandela to the presidency of South Africa. Let's be clear. They treated him like the head of state he was meant to be. And if you were here in Harlem to see him, or in the Canyon of Heroes, or if you were at Yankee Stadium, anyone there remembers that beautiful moment? Wasn't that breathtaking? This city, by honoring Nelson Mandela, changed the world. That was one day. That was one thing that David Dinkins did of so many. But don't forget what he did for us that lasts until this day. He knew this city could be better, and that was his power. He told us he could be better, and he did something about it. Yes, Rev is right. The reason we got safer, let's give credit where credit is due. Safe streets, safe city. David Dinkins did that. But never forget what he insisted on. He said it's not just our traditional notion of public safety. It's about kids. It's about kids. It's about families. He said if we're going to be safer, there have to be after-school programs. There has to be. He created the Beacon programs. And they live today, brothers and sisters. The Beacon programs are alive and well. The Beacon schools are helping children today because of what David Dinkins did decades ago. And we're building upon that. And I want to remind everyone that's our legacy. To take what David Dinkins started and keep it moving, keep it growing. And here's the last thing I want to say. And it's about every one of us who was moved by him, nurtured by him, supported by him, encouraged by him, mentored by him. There's a whole generation in this city that got our start because of David Dinkins. They got a helping hand from David Dinkins. They got that word of encouragement. There's a generation of people who believed they could make a difference because they saw David Dinkins do it first. He has a human legacy you can feel right here in this room. Right behind me, all these great people. Everyone who brags that we had the honor to work for him, with him, to support him. He hasn't left us. He's left us physically. He hasn't left us in our hearts.
That's it.
His mission continues. He continues to inspire. I can feel his presence right here in this room. Can you? Right here in this room. So Rev, thank you for bringing us together in this place synonymous with continuing a noble struggle. But David Dinkins used to always say it to us. Keep the faith. He knew we could do it. He believed in us. He made us better. He made us stronger. And now we carry on his legacy. Thank you. God bless you all.
Give a hand, Mayor Bill de Blasio. Every once in a while, a reporter will ask me about, in my journey, I was very close with James Brown. And they asked me, what is my favorite James Brown song? And there are many. But for the last couple of weeks, I keep hearing James singing in my ear, Georgia on my mind. I woke up this morning getting on the elliptical. I hear him singing, there's a sweet old song called Georgia on my mind. And then I found out the reason when he walked in. Because if Georgia goes right, the minority leader becomes a majority leader. So I bring you a friend of David Dinkins, one who has walked and fought with us in the trenches, and the next majority leader of the U.S. Senate from Brooklyn, New York, Senator Chuck Schumer.
Thank you, my man. My friend, my Brooklyn fellow Brooklynite, the great leader of America from one end of America to the other, Reverend Al Sharpton. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I thank Mayor de Blasio and Shirlane for those wonderful and You know what the Bible says? The best compliments are paid to someone not in the room who doesn't hear them. That's true. But let me thank them. And let me thank so many of the great leaders on this stage who helped David Dinkins and then continued and are continuing his work afterwards, and not the least of which, the greatest of which, is my dear friend and mentor, Charlie Rangel. What a great man. When David passed away, I got on the phone with Charlie and we commiserated and remembered and had joy in the great accomplishments of David Dinkins. And let me just say this, here's my little story. In 1977, I was a young assemblyman. I endorsed Ed Koch for mayor back then. He was okay. But by 1989, New York, as you know, had become a racial tinderbox. And Koch had me to lunch, and he said, I want you to support me. I said, Mr. Mayor, New York needs someone who's going to bring us together, and at this point, you are pulling us apart. We have somebody who can do that. Koch walked out of the restaurant in the middle of the meal and tried to get his vengeance when he supported Al D'Amato against me, whereas Reverend Sharpton and all the people on this stage were on my side. But I was so proud to tell Ed Koch that David Dinkins should be our next mayor in 1989. And why? So many reasons, and Mayor de Blasio and Charlene and so many others. But above all, especially now, with the evil specter of Donald Trump fading but still hovering over us, we need a gorgeous mosaic in America the way David Dinkins created a gorgeous mosaic in New York City. He was one of the first to tell all of New York and all of America that we all had to work together, and we had to recognize people who had been oppressed for generations, that they had to be a part of that mosaic, and we had to all work together. And he got a lot of grief for it. Back in 1989, 1990, you know, to say that people of all different colors should come together, a lot of people didn't like that. But Dinkins stood his ground, and everything he did was with grace and dignity and a smile. Even when he got angry, his voice was soft. And he was angry a lot of times for what was done to him in our city. But he was great. So I miss him. He's helped shape me as he's helped shape all of us in this room, Charlie. And now Charlie, of the four brothers, here you are. Your dad, Percy Sutton, and David Dinkins, who were trailblazers at a time when it wasn't easy to be trailblazers. And we treasure Charlie for Charlie, and we treasure Charlie for his brother David Dinkins. Now one more point. Georgia. And I will not try to sing. Ray Charles, I do like him too. He talked about Georgia. But one thing, we can do this. And guess who's helping us do this? And people may not know this. I recruited Pastor Raphael Warnock to run for the Senate. Sharpton helped me do it. He didn't want to do it. I told him he had an obligation. But guess where I first met Raphael Warnock?
He was the assistant pastor here in Harlem at the Abyssinian Baptist Church. That's when I first met him. And then, of course, he went to the Ebenezer Baptist Church, the greatest pulpit in the land, Dr. King's pulpit. But we can do this. And if we do it, and we will do it, we are going to change America. We are not just going to we are not just going to say, go home Donald Trump. We're going to tear down the evil things he did and put things for racial justice and economic equality and climate in his place, and he will hate it, and we will take back America. Thank you. God bless you. On to victory in Georgia in David Dinkins' memory. Georgia.
Give a hand, Senator Chuck Schumer. In 2001, I want you, Senator, to hear this on your way out. Senator Schumer, in 2001, we did a sit-in in Vieques, Puerto Rico. And Assemblyman Rivera was here this morning. He and I and two others were given time in jail. I did 90 days. After 3 days, they came and got us out of the cell in San Juan and said, we can't let you go, but we're transferring you to at least do your time in Brooklyn. Because Senator Chuck Schumer demanded that if you won't release them, at least bring them home. And y'all love him for many reasons. I love him because at least I got to do my time in my native borough of Brooklyn. And one of the stories there, thank you, Senator, one of the stories there is that a friend of mine, we all, Keith Wright, had a little meeting we'd have every once in a while. David Patterson, Greg Meeks, and me. And we were young and were dreaming about what we wanted to be. We would always say, Congressman Rango, that, David, you're going to be our second black mayor, chief executive of the city. And Greg Meeks was in the assembly then. We said, you're going to be congressman from Queens. And I said, well, I want to be the civil rights leader. Well, you're going to be our Jesse Jackson. Well, while I was in jail, Congressman Rango, Greg Meeks and David Patterson came to see me. David Patterson was lieutenant governor on his way to be governor. And he said, I did it, Al. I didn't become mayor. I'm going to be governor. Greg Meeks had left the assembly and was a congressman. And he had achieved his dream. He was a member of Congress and still is. And they looked at me in my orange jail jumpsuit and said, you're the big civil rights leader. You made it. Going back to your cell. That's my friend. David Patterson is another David that does not get the credit for the visionary leadership and the backbone he stood up. And I want, he didn't know I knew this, but he wrote this book that's just come out, Black, Blind, and in Charge. And we're going to have a book signing for him right here at the House of Justice. This is going to be our Christmas gift to our children. I bring you now the former governor of the state of New York and the author of Black, Blind, and in Charge, and former staff member to David N. Dinkins, David A. Patterson.
Brothers and sisters of all cultures and persuasions, if you look around this room, you see something that did not always exist in this community. We have the civil rights community represented here. We have the faith-based community represented here. We have the business community represented here. We have the political community represented here. We have the activist community represented here. And we have the grassroots community represented here. In just a few months, it will mark the 30th anniversary of when Reverend Al Sharpton started having these movements of the National Action Network that started on 134th Street at PS 175 right here in Harlem. And even in the greatest days of the Gang of Four and all the marches and all the work that we did, we definitely worked together, but we didn't convene together the way we do now here at the House of Justice, thanks to the great and enduring Reverend Al Sharpton. Well, I want to talk for a moment about the statistics that bear out what Reverend Sharpton and Hazel Dukes and Congressman Rangel and former Assemblyman Keith Wright and others, including Mayor de Blasio, said today. From 1984 to 1990, there was a 64% increase in crime. The deaths from homicide went over 2,000 in 1986. So the deaths from homicide were over 2,000 for 4 years before David Dinkins ever saw the mayor's office.
Yeah.
Now, if you listen to people,
Tell the story.
they talk about this all the time, on the radio, on television, at events, in boardrooms, and this is what they say. Crime is up, the subways are more dangerous than ever, the homeless population's overtaking us, and they first start blaming it on Mayor de Blasio. Then when they're finished with that, they say it's just like it was in the 80s when Dinkins was mayor. In fact, David Dinkins was not mayor of New York for 1 second of the 80s. Now,
Tell the story, baby.
in 1990, when Mayor Dinkins took office, the crime rate in those days was actually over 2,100. For 2 years, it went down. He got it under 2,000. By the end of his administration, he cut crime by 25%. So why do they make the correlation of homelessness, crime, and danger on the subways with Mayor David Dinkins? Now, I have raised this issue. This is the 15th time. I'm keeping count. This is the 15th time I've spoken in public since the mayor's unfortunate passing on Monday night. And only 2 of the times have I ever gotten this message across. One was on Good Day New York, and the other was on the Brian Lehrer show on WNYC because they were live interviews. Everybody else cut out what I said about this and had me saying, and I did say this, he was like an uncle to me. He was always a gentleman. He was a wonderful person to people. He loved children, and he loved his wife. That is so sinister and anachronistic, I can't even take it anymore.
All right.
Here's the real deal. That's what they say about people who they've been maligning through their whole political life, and then for a few days after they die, they go, oh, he was a nice guy, that David Dinkins. And by next week, they'll be back to saying it again. So what we have to do, since the media can't seem to get the simplest message across, is we're going to have to carry the message ourselves. And there's a lot of discussion about trying to facilitate electronic media to give that opportunity, and we're really going to need it, because David Dinkins, as a mayor, is not being represented correctly. Commissioner Raymond Kelly said to me the other day that the reason that the outbreak of violence in Crown Heights wasn't quelled sooner is because there were chiefs in the police department who on the lower level did not carry out the orders of the mayor and himself, the police commissioner. That's why, because the police stood around when they should have been working. Now, I think for Commissioner Kelly to say that is so decent and so honest that he could just go along with the rest of them and go, oh, David Dinkins, he couldn't stop the riot in Crown Heights. The other issue is that Mayor Dinkins' Safe City, Safe Streets program brought 6,000 new police officers to New York. But they didn't get there until after he left. So guess who took the credit for it, as Reverend Sharpton said? Mayor Giuliani. And I don't know what happened to Mayor Giuliani. I saw him the other day, he looked like he was in blackface. So, the reality is that Mayor Dinkins' work, believe it or not, even with his passing, is not done. It's up to us to point out these statistics. None of them can be refuted. Some of them come from the leadership of the city at that particular time and give Mayor Dinkins the happiness that I don't think he ever got to enjoy as a mayor. But I know he's happy because he got to spend Thanksgiving with his wife Joyce. Thank you very much.
Give a hand, Congressman Johnny Rainey. As we close this part of the program, I think it would be befitting to hear from the granddaughter of one of the Harlem Gang of Four, the granddaughter of our leader, Percy Ellis Sutton. Let's hear from Keisha Sutton James.
First of all, thank you. Good morning, fam. Is it still morning? It is still morning. I just want to, first of all, thank you, Reverend Sharpton, and my whole NAN family for having me here today. It has been a difficult week, as we all know. Needless to say, I was heartbroken when I woke up to the news of my mayor's passing. I'm going to take this off. He was my Uncle Dave as well. I was blessed to have been one of the children that he poured into, that he adored. I adored him. He adored me. He was adorable. I'm surprised nobody mentioned adorable things about him. I know that Governor Patterson said that, you know, for those of us who say these kinds of things, it's unseemly, if you will, but I felt it. You know, he was a nice guy. He was a good person. And one of the sweetest things, some of the sweetest things I remember about him is the way he talked about his wife. He never said that Joyce was his wife. He always said, my bride. For 67 years, he referred to his wife as his bride, with a twinkle in his eye. It was the most beautiful thing. He referred to me as the most Sutton of the Suttons, which I'm going to take as a compliment. But I was especially sad on that day because I also was carrying with me the weight of Congressman Rangel. After my grandfather passed, I'm going to speak very personally, after my grandfather passed, he was my rock. He was so much, any guidance I ever needed came from my grandfather. And so losing him was a major moment in my life. And Congressman Rangel, Basil Patterson, and David Dinkins became my surrogates. I told them immediately, I said, you are my surrogate grandfathers. Whether you like it or not, you're mine. So losing him on that day was very heavy. And I thought about Rangel. I thought about my congressman, who I interned for several times, and being the last of the four, and how that must feel for him. But what was the heaviest part about it was that I learned of Mayor Dinkins' passing on the 100th birthday of my grandfather. So those of you know, anyone who's lost a loved one, you know how hard it is when their birthdays come, when their anniversaries come, and how much you miss them. And that particular day, obviously, it's the 100th. So I had big plans for my grandfather for his 100th, and then COVID came. So I was disappointed that couldn't happen. It was a tough day. I talked to my sister, Stacy Lynch. I talked to my sister, Bill Lynch's daughter, talked to my sister, Dom, about the way we were feeling, with that loss. And the thing that shifted me, frankly, and I'm not going to talk about Mayor Dinkins' record because everybody has covered that amply, but the thing that shifted my energy was a vision that I had in my head. We all know that Percy Sutton, Mayor Dinkins, Basil Patterson, and Charlie Rangel were always clean, sharp, the double-breasted suits, the handkerchief in the pocket. And I envisioned my grandfather's 100th birthday up in heaven. And the vision is, so we already had a party planned, obviously, because it's his 100th. And imagine this party, the people who have gathered for Percy Sutton's 100th. And now, it gets to be a welcome Dave party as well. So not only did he transition, obviously, to be with his bride, who just passed 6 weeks before him, but he transitioned to crash the Percy 100 party and make it a welcome Dave party. And I just had this vision of Mrs. Dinkins, Joy, standing there with his glass of champagne, because he did enjoy a glass of champagne for a special occasion, and then opening the door, and all these beautiful people, whether it's my grandfather Percy or Basil, but I think Daniel might still be here. I know the governor left. Or Lloyd Dickens, or J. Raymond Jones, or Shirley Chisholm, or Nelson Mandela, or any number of people who worked in this struggle with them, who were like together, arm in arm, and as they said, even when there was some light between them, it was never seen outside that there was light between them. And they were in that struggle together, and here they get to celebrate both Percy Sutton and David Dinkins' arrival on that day. And the vision of that is what carried me through the day, I will say. And then further, I will also, I'm just going to add to that what has comforted me since then is this knowledge, as Mayor de Blasio referred to, this knowledge that I had been poured into, that we have all been poured into, that this man, that my grandfather tried to break the door open in '77, and Mayor Dinkins was able to break the door open in '89, and we'll see, hopefully, maybe Ray McGuire will come in right behind him, and that's the whole point, is that we're opening doors for decades later, for generations that come behind us. And I am one of those people who is with each one of you in this struggle. And I know that I have been inspired by each and every one of them up there. And I know they put ideas in my head, and I know they say, take this step in that way. And the ancestors speak to me. They say, go this way. I know for a fact my grandfather said, Keisha, go ask Alvin Bragg if there's a role you can take with his campaign. And he said, would you be campaign manager? I said, okay. Okay, I could do that. But I didn't know, I know it didn't come to me, didn't just come to me. My ancestors put it there. So I'll say this. When when at moments like this, feel their presences. Feel their inspiration. Look out for their inspiration, because they are up there and they are with us. They are pushing every step that we take, and you take it and you run with it, because this is the struggle. And I'll disagree with Mayor Breyer on one thing. The cavalry is not coming, because we are the cavalry. We are the people that are going to make the change. So let's take that inspiration and make that change that President Obama always talked about, because we are the change we need, and let's be our own cavalry. And with that, I give praise to my mayor, I give praise to the Gang of Four, and I bid you adieu. Adieu.
Keisha, Sutton, James. And as you heard us say, Dinkins used to say, Mayor Dinkins used to say, she's the most Sutton. You saw she got up and endorsed Ray McGuire, Alvin Bragg. That's a Sutton move. She got all of her candidates in before she sat down. Give her another hand. I want to say that I want to thank Lloyd Williams. I said Lloyd Dickens, that's Inez's father, for really partnering with us, because I think that we need to understand that we should not take for granted when giants come our way. We ought not let society tell us who we ought to salute. We ought to tell society who is worthy of our saluting. And the reason why it's hard for us to look up to small guys is because we have seen real giants. And we know the difference between a giant and someone that is not. Dave Dinkins was a giant. He stood up when it was hard to stand up, and he held up even when he didn't get credit. And that's why we paused this morning to give gratitude and thanks. It is one thing to be unaware. It's another thing to be ungrateful. If you're unaware, you may be miseducated. If you're ungrateful, you're of low character and of someone not worthy of what you've received. All right, everybody's singing. Everybody's singing. Everybody's singing. Sing it like you mean it. Sing it like you mean it. Sing it like you mean it. One more time, y'all. One more time, y'all. One more time, y'all. All right. I'm going to raise our offering and let us go. We know we thank WLIB for letting us go overtime today and Impact Television. Let us raise our offering and we will let you go for the day. I need everybody to give to the best of their ability. Thank all of our speakers, and I'm grateful that our senators, our mayor, and everyone came and gave respect to David Dinkins. All right. I'll raise our regular offering. I need about 10 people that can give $100 or more to come quickly. The Guardian's giving $100. I need 9 more. I need some hundreds of you. Michael Gardner, $100. Hazel Dukes, $100. Minister Winston Gilchrist, $100. Kerry Weiss, Central Park, 5, or exonerated 5, $100. Daniel Patterson, my brother, $100. Ray McGuire, candidate for mayor, $100. Lloyd Williams, $100. Keisha Sutton, James, $100. My schoolmate coming, $100. All right. 50s, come on, 50s. If you have 50, come on, Alan Bragg. This is his personal money, not his campaign money. $50. Brother Jones, Mayor Rodney Jones from Queensbridge, $50. Come on, 50. Minister Carolyn, Reverend Carolyn coming, $50. Brother Mallory, $50. Come on. Diana Forrest, thank you. She spoke earlier, thank you. 20s. Come on, 20. Now everybody, whatever you have, $1, $5, $10, whatever you have. witnessed history this morning as the community came with some of our highest elected officials to honor David Dinkins. Let us all stand as we get ready to dismiss. I always have people fist bump with each other at the end. You that want to come up and give fist bump with me can. And those that want to get books, you can get them at the counter. I'll sign them for you. But let us go forward and keep the work of David Dinkins alive. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Repeat after me, we're an African people, robbed of our name, our language, our family, our self-respect, but we shall rise, never to fall again. Up, you mighty race, we can accomplish what we will. No justice, no peace, no justice, no peace, no justice, no peace. Fist bump with the one next to you, come and give me a